Hello and welcome to Elena Meets the Author. This podcast explores how authors create a world that we can escape into. Join me as we demystify the magic that keeps us turning the page. Hello and welcome to Elena Meets the Author. I am your host, Elena Bose. Today I'm speaking with Katie Yee, the debut author of Maggie, or A Man and a Woman Walk into a Bar. This slim novel of 199 pages is not really like any book I've read before. I guess Nora Ephron's Heartburn comes to mind. Both stories are comic tragedies, a cheating husband, a heartbroken wife, but the protagonists are very different. Nora's protagonist is angry and funny and loves to cook. Katie's is observant, introspective, and funny and loves to tell stories. The book title, Maggie or A Man and a Woman Walk into a Bar, makes you think of an old joke. Only when Katie's protagonist walks into a bar, or in this case, an all-you-can-eat Indian buffet restaurant with her husband, he tells her he's having an affair with a white woman named Maggie. Soon after, the protagonist discovers she has breast cancer and names the tumor Maggie. Now, divorce, cancer, not such cheery topics. But in Katie's hands, I kept laughing. Not loud, raucous laughter, but more chuckling about the narrator's relatable observations. She hates the tiny triangular paper cups in the doctor's waiting room that never hold enough water, and the outdated, cheesy magazines. She never sees issues of The Atlantic or The New Yorker, maybe because those readers are too smart to get cancer. She writes a guide to My Husband, a user's manual, and ponders whether she should give it to Maggie, the mistress, not the tumor. This story touches on love, heartbreak, motherhood, and the origin stories we tell ourselves, how sometimes they might need a little updating when they don't work for us anymore. The book is so slender at 199 pages that you can take it with you anywhere, a waiting room, the subway, any kind of a line, which is such a pleasant surprise. I love short novels. Welcome to the show, Katie. I'm so glad you could join.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction.
It's all true. It was a very easy introduction because this book is it's just great. I marked up so many lines that I loved. They're all too many.
Thank you.
It's really, you're a great writer. So I have to say that when I was surprised when I finished the book. I Googled you expecting to read a bio of medical and romantic trauma, but no, you aren't married and you don't have breast cancer, and you're, I think, still 29.
That is correct. Okay. That is absolutely correct.
But what you have is a great imagination. Can you tell us how these two interwoven stories came to you?
Yes, of course. So I guess the thing that I'll start with is the breast cancer piece. Breast cancer, unfortunately, runs in my family. My grandmother had it, my mother as well. So while it's something that I don't have firsthand experience with, I've been, in rooms like these. I've been in waiting rooms. I've gone to exam rooms with them. I myself have been screened from like a very young age just because it's genetic. And I think so much of the way that I process the world is through writing fiction. And I had been trying and failing to write about breast cancer kind of as a way to understand it for like a really long time, what feels like most of my writing life. So that's kind of one piece that I'll set aside over here. And the other piece, you asked about the divorce. Definitely at the time that I had started writing this, I was going through what felt like an earth-shattering breakup, but was probably just some very minor blip of the heart. And because I'm a Scorpio, I was like, let's harness this emotion and let's raise the stakes. So instead of a breakup with a nobody, let's make it a divorce and let's kind of see what happens. And Maggie started as two separate short stories that I kind of ended up throwing together. I just thought that they wove together in kind of an interesting way. I felt like in one of them, I had created a narrator who I had hoped was resilient and funny and who just saw the world in such an interesting way. And I kind of wanted to see how much I could lovingly throw at her. I wanted to see what she could hold.
Right. And why did you not name her?
Yes, I get asked this a lot. Because, names are obviously very important in the story. She names her tumor after her husband's lover as a way to, take the reins back of her own life, right? This is how she's kind of taking control of the story. But when you name something, I think you lay claim over it, right? That's kind of the whole point. In the novel, she has a really hard time naming both of her children because she wants to get to know them. She has this innate curiosity about them, and she's kind of afraid to put her own stamp on them that way. And when it came time to decide whether or not I was going to name our narrator, and you'll notice I'm calling her our narrator, I wanted her to feel like she could belong to not just me, but to you and to anyone listening. And I thought that maybe there was something about giving her a very particular name that I didn't feel was necessary, or that I felt would maybe take away from the reader's experience, feeling like they could be talking to any friend. The other thing is, I feel like in fairy tales and in myths, there's something very like trickstery almost about names and about being the one to have your name be concealed, right? Like I'm thinking of Rumpelstiltskin dancing around saying, "You'll never guess my name." And in a way, there's almost something to her anonymity in that way that gives her a little bit more control, I think, that could also be kind of interesting.
Yeah. And to be honest, I just read the book. I barely noticed that you didn't name her until I watched another interview, and I'm like, oh, that's right. She didn't name her. And it only really comes up when I'm writing my questions, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to call her now? The narrator, the protagonist. So I didn't find it clearly. It just was super smooth.
Thank you. Well, I think because so much of it is you're so close to her.
Yes.
In the eye. So maybe that it's not feeling lacking. Someone else I was talking to pointed out that it kind of conveys how lonely she is in her life, that for the entire duration of the novel, no one says her name. You know, her ex-husband never says her name. Obviously, her kids call her mom. And there's kind of a loneliness to that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, she's definitely lonely. You convey all that, like when the kids go to the father and just her nights and the whole thing about him leaving her is anew. But I like the way eventually she claims herself back. One of my favorite characters in your book is the best friend, Darlene. Everyone should have a Darlene who knows exactly what they need when they need it. You write that Darlene soft launches her disdain for Sam, the husband, knowing she can't go full throttle because Sam is the father of the narrator's adored two children, Noah and Lily. And later, when the narrator asks Darlene how she thinks Maggie is in bed, Darlene replies, terrible, a pillow princess. She fakes orgasms, but in the ways guys like. I just love that. It really stopped me in my tracks there. I was wondering, do you have a Darlene in your life, or maybe you are Darlene, which is why you get lost and heartbreak so well?
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, Darlene was also, if I'm allowed to have favorite characters, like Darlene is also my absolute favorite. And she was a really important character for me to write into this book because I feel like there are so many like phenomenal, like quote unquote divorce novels out there. I'm thinking of like Jenny Offel's Department of Speculation or like Weike Wang's Chemistry, and just on and on. I mean, like Megan Hunter's Harpy, I could go on forever. And I feel like every time I read these novels, I'm always like, but where is her best friend? Because I'm so lucky. And I think like for me personally, I've never had to go through anything like impossibly difficult in my life without the help or the shoulder or the ear of like a very best friend. I'm lucky in that I've got a couple of Darlenes in my life, and I had the best time like cherry picking traits of each of them and kind of dropping them into this character. And she was just so fun to spend time with on the page because she really is like an homage to all these women that I know and that I love. And now that the book is out, it's been such a delight having them get to read it in its final iteration. And I've been getting texts from them these past couple of weeks just being like, hey, this little detail, like, that's me. Or like, this job that you gave her is pretty adjacent to my job. Like, is that me? And yeah, it's just like a very fun Where is Waldo almost.
I'm divorced and remarried, but I remember when I got divorced, my friends were everything. Because you can't talk to your children. You can't always talk to a therapist or, because you might want to talk to a therapist 24/7. And you figure out which friends, I don't have a Darlene, I have a bunch like you.
Yeah.
Which friends are really helpful. And you're absolutely right. You need to have a friend. You can't just go through it on your own.
Absolutely. Well, and you need friends that are going to give you some tough love in some moments. But as you mentioned in the passage that you read, like there is also a nuance and a complexity to heartbreak that you really need a friend to to be able to hold with you, right? Like there were obviously parts of this man and this family that you loved and still love. So finding a friend that could also hold that as well as their absolute anger and rage towards him.
Exactly. I was wondering if you could read a Darlene excerpt. I think it's page 24. Yeah. When Darlene, towards the end, with that quote, when Darlene first hears about Sam, when the narrator tells Darlene what's happened, and it starts with, what the? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, what the fuck, Darlene says when I'm finished. Somewhere in the kitchen, her tea kettle starts whistling. Sorry, let me get that, she says. But when she returns, it's with 2 Bloody Marys instead. I'm out of celery, she apologizes, and we clink glasses even though there is nothing to celebrate. Of course we stalk her on the internet immediately. We have only her first name and the fact that Sam met her through work to go on, but that proves to be enough. Darlene finds her on LinkedIn in a matter of seconds. Shit, she says, staring at the screen. She's cute. In Maggie's LinkedIn profile picture, she's wearing a generic black blazer with a matching turtleneck underneath. In those 2 inches, her outfit makes her look like she's impersonating Elizabeth Holmes impersonating Steve Jobs. She is undeniably, as Darlene said, cute. She has green eyes and long, wavy brown hair that she highlighted blonde. She smiles with her teeth, which are almost perfectly straight, except for one in the bottom row, which makes her look more approachable somehow. White woman, Darlene says, exasperated. Of course, it wasn't lost on me that Maggie was white. It added another layer to the betrayal. On the other hand, would it have been better if she were Chinese? Of course not. While choosing another Asian woman would have screamed fetish, the fact that it was a white woman begged the question of regret. Did he feel that in choosing me, he had chosen wrong?
Thank you. That's really good. And also in the book, you don't really harp on, or you don't stress that she's Chinese. You just have these ways of bringing it in, which I thought was really good. It was more subtle. And I wanted to talk about subtle racism. So can you comment? I mean, that's one of the themes that you've got. So it's almost better when it's subtle. And both Sam, as we discussed, Sam, the husband, and Maggie are both white, and you sort of imply, that they are superior people, or they're seen as superior. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, growing up, I only had to read as part of like a core curriculum, maybe 1 or 2 books by Asian American writers when I was like in high school and in college. And the one that I do think we had to read in high school is Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club. Mm. And, that's kind of like your classic like immigrant story. And it's something that I personally don't really relate to since, my dad was born here. My mom immigrated here when she was 3 years old. I'm pretty solidly second generation. And I'm thinking about there's this phenomenal writer, Sequoia Nagamatsu, who wrote How High We Go in the Dark. Love his writing. And he said in an interview once something that I'll never forget, where he said that as a 3rd-generation Japanese American, race was always present but not central in his stories. Mm. And I think that very much applies here, where there's no way that the race isn't an important factor in the book, but it's not the whole thing. And I think even in the passage that I just read, you see her kind of wondering, well, how much of his choice to leave was a little bit racially motivated. But I think we all do this thing when we go through breakups, right? This is such a universal experience still, where someone breaks your heart and you're racking your brain for, what was it that you didn't have? What was it that you said or didn't say, do or didn't do, that kind of led them to make this choice to leave you? And so I think like there was no way that race wasn't going to be part of her questioning of his motivations. The other thing I'll say is that when I started writing the book, I didn't realize how important the children were going to end up being. So as you said, she's Chinese American and her husband is white. So her children are biracial. And, when I was writing this book, my boyfriend and I, he's white and I am Chinese American. We moved in together and I also hit my late 20s. And I was getting all these questions about when we were going to get married and when we, when we were going to have children. And the other thing that happened is the pandemic. And with it came all of this violence against Asian Americans, right? And I grew up in New York City. It's a place where I've always felt extremely safe. But then you were seeing all these news stories of like, Asian women getting pushed into the subway tracks. And it was really jarring for me because I've always felt like impossibly safe in this city since it's like my hometown. And all of a sudden I just felt very hyper visible and like afraid in a way that I never had before. So I think that's actually kind of where the children came in, is because I started to think about whether or not I wanted to or could, bring kids into the world who even looked a little bit like me, who I couldn't protect from, racism's big and small, right? Violence or very subtle racist comments in the classroom, anything like that.
Wow. That's very interesting. So you wrote this during COVID, or this was when you were thinking?
Yeah, I've been working on it on and off, I want to say, for the past 5 years. The very earliest draft I could find of it as like a baby short story was maybe in 2019,
Right.
right before the pandemic. So I did write the bulk of it during COVID.
And do you feel now that it wouldn't take much for it to just come back again? Like you can't really...
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree that kind of I guess the bulk of that AAPI targeted violence, I guess, is, as you've said, died down. But there is still, if you look at the news, I'm sure we could open up any newspaper and in any given moment, there are so many racist stories, in the news every day. And
yeah, it's not a good time.
No.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. The narrator writes about her children with such love and curiosity. I loved how she saw them as individuals who she wanted to get to know. Like, what were they going to turn out to be without any pressure from her? Were your parents like that with you? They were?
Absolutely. So while I'm not myself a mother, and while I'm still, deeply on the fence for myself, I thought in writing motherhood, I would have a clear answer when I came out of it on the other side, but I'm still not sure. But so much of the motherhood aspect of the book, I've really pulled from my relationship to my own mother. I completely credit her and her curiosity about me and her love of storytelling, to why I am a writer today. I was really lucky growing up. I was never sent to bed without a bedtime story. And my mom was a classics major in undergrad. So she would always tell me all these toned down versions, kid-friendly versions of all the Greek myths. And she would tell me some Chinese myths that she knew, and from my grandmother. And I did really want to pay homage to the way I fell in love with storytelling by creating this really nurturing mother who loved telling her kids stories and who loved helping them kind of find their own voice within the storytelling. She would do this really cool thing that I think is kind of a cool parenting hack, where she would tell me a story and then she would finish and she would say, okay, now it's your turn. And this is kind of a nice way of if you're tired of entertaining your kids, you kind of just let them entertain you. But I do feel like that invitation to be creative and to use my own voice and to share what I thought was interesting, from such a young age, literally I remember us sitting in this diner when I was 3 years old. She'd pick me up after preschool and we would get French fries and a vanilla milkshake and we would just tell each other stories. That encouragement to do that from such a young age was so vital.
Special.
Yeah. And I wanted our narrator here to look at her children with that same curiosity and love.
I loved that. Yeah, she really let them figure out who they were.
Exactly.
Which was great. Do you have a favorite story?
There are so many good ones. I had a really hard time, honestly, researching some of the myths to put in here, because I remembered some of them from my childhood, but at some point I was like, well, I wonder what are some of the myths that I didn't hear or that just weren't in our personal family canon. And I had a really hard time researching Asian mythology. Of course you could pull shelves and shelves of Greek and Roman.
Yeah.
And so most of my research was like going back to my mom and grandma and being like, oh, would you tell me another story actually? Or I kind of remember this one. Would you tell it to me again? The Zodiac story, I do always love the story of the 12 animals in the Zodiac and kind of how the order of them was divined with this race.
Yeah. And then each of the children, they were happy about their sign, right? I'm trying to...
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah, I think what's kind of special about this story is there's a way that you can really...
rat.
The rat wins.
That's right.
The rat wins. The rat is very clever, jumps on the back of the ox. But yeah, this one's kind of cool because it's like not exactly like choose your own adventure, but because, the year that you're born does designate you an animal in the zodiac, there is a way that you can kind of see yourself in the story. There is a character that you're rooting for because it's the one that you know that you are.
Love it. Okay, great. One of the most poignant parts is when the narrator writes about how her children are too young to grasp divorce, separation, and it occurs to the narrator that she can't protect her children from hurt. Well, you've kind of talked about that in saying that you're a little bit on the fence yourself because you can't. And actually, the book that I just read, the Annie Hartnett book, was the same theme, that you can't really protect them. But I think in your book, it's that they're so young. The daughter is 4 in the book.
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't remember how old is Noah?
He is, I think, oh my goodness. Well, now this is going to be embarrassing. I think he turns 9.
So it was especially with Lily, where she watched how she put it together and just the sadness because she didn't have the words. That was very poignant, and her voice got softer or something when that was kind of heartbreaking.
Thank you. I mean, it's so, I think it's so funny because kids do this and I think adults do this too. And we often lack the words for it. Like, you meet someone, you fall in love, you have kids, you kind of become this singular unit in a way. And I was thinking a lot too about, I took this one social psychology class in college where we talked about the difference between individualist and collectivist cultures. So individualist being, a country like America where we really, praise uniqueness and individuality, the self, and then, you have collectivist cultures. A lot of Asian countries tend to have this mentality where the community, the family is always at the forefront of who you are. You're always thinking about your neighbors, your family. There's a lot of filial piety. And I think in the case of our narrator, she kind of loses the trees to the forest, if that makes sense. She almost loses her ability to kind of see herself within this unit. And so I think when she's watching Lily be so disappointed and so heartbroken over what she's realized is happening, I think for the narrator, that's also kind of reflected back in her own, consciousness of like, right, this unit, this like singular thing that I was really at the forefront of my identity is now being ripped apart.
I feel like maybe in the protagonist's case, she lost her individuality. She has to get it back.
Absolutely. Well, as I feel like many women do, right? Like in families, I mean, I don't mean to like super overgeneralize, but there are so many stories of, women becoming mothers and kind of being overlooked in this really important way.
Yeah. It can be a lonely thing because you're in the home so much, taking care of them. And a mother tends to, it's not always the case, obviously, but it is, children need their mother. At the beginning, they really need their mother.
Yeah, that's also why I found it important to have her be able to step outside the home a little bit in these like moments with her best friend, Darlene, right?
Have a cocktail.
Exactly. Yeah, they have their cocktails, they laugh, they hang out like they did in college. It was just so important for me to have this other kind of mirror to her character, someone who saw her as an individual.
Yeah. And also the fact that Darlene doesn't have children and she's single, I think. She's single. She's got her dog. So she's a nice contrast.
Exactly.
No, it was very, very good because I think one of the things when you do get divorced is you do have to rediscover yourself apart from the family because all of a sudden the family is kind of shattered. Another heartbreaking time, even though this book is quite funny. That's the thing.
People are not going to believe you.
I know. But it is because you've got so many good observations that are funny, but I couldn't put them all in. And also I don't want to be like ruin them. Like I want people to read them for the first time. But when you say that the narrator is reminded of who she used to be when they had so much in front of them. And I remember when I got divorced a long time ago, I thought, what am I supposed to do with our photo albums? Because they have our children in them. And what do you do with all those joint memories? Because in your, what do you call it? Your origin story, all those things are just like part of it. And then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I have to change my origin story because I don't really want to dwell on this part of my life. So I thought the whole origin story element to your book was fascinating.
Thank you. I mean, who among us has not dated someone for like a little bit too long? Just because the meet cute story was so good. I dated this guy right out of college because we met on the subway. And he asked me what I was reading. And I was like, this is it. Like, meet cute to end all meet cutes, rom-com, call Nora Ephron. This is it. And, he wasn't amazing. But I was like, I think we just have to hang on because the universe would never have given me a story so good if it wasn't supposed to work out. But yeah, just rethinking the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, I think is so interesting. Yeah. It's an interesting exercise. And what do you do too, right? Exactly like you were saying, what do you do with all the photo albums of the shared memories? And what do you do with all of the weird things that you remember about someone that you've loved, right? All their quirks and all their, and like you read in the description at the beginning, she decides to just sit down and try to write like a user's manual to her husband as a way to kind of like exorcise him out of her system. It
was a very clever tactic for her.
Thank
because
you.
Writing really helps. So on to some of the process. So as I said, I marked up so many sentences that I loved that struck me as so true. What is your writing process? Does it just flow out of you, these fabulous lines?
Oh gosh, I wish. I mostly write by hand. There's something about the physical activity of writing and kind of the slowness of it almost. I like being surprised by the next word to come out. If you're typing in a Google Doc and it has the like AI suggested next word, if you're going to write down what they are suggesting, I feel like you're writing the wrong thing. I always want to write something surprising. Right. And I think writing by hand really allows me to do that on like a craft level.
Interesting.
But basically, I just write in my little notebook. I write and I write and I write and I rewrite scenes a couple of times. And basically, I don't look back though. So whatever makes it into the next iteration, whatever I remember, I think is probably worth hanging on to is usually how I think about it. And then once it's worded exactly as I want it to be worded in the notebook, that's when it goes into the computer. So a lot of handwritten drafts first.
Yeah. So is the draft that goes into the computer is pretty final?
I mean, you always want your agent and your editor's input, of course. So it obviously changes a lot once you bring other people into the process. But for me, it'll be like, I'll write a scene and I'll tinker with it in the notebook and then it goes into the computer. And then I'll write another scene and then I'll decide where it goes, things like that.
And what did you submit to the agent? What was your first thing? How long was the submission?
So because I started as like a short story writer, I tend to write very sparsely. And I was having a really hard time reaching like a novel length anything. The concept of sustaining plot really baffled me. I was like, what do you mean things have to happen every couple of pages and they have to be interesting and believable? And I think the rules are just so different from a short story. But when I handed this in to my agent, it was probably only exactly 40,000 words because I had been Googling, like, what is the minimum number of words that can pass as a novel? And the internet said, 40,000 is like cuspy novella novel territory. And I said, okay, just as for an end goal to reach for, 40,000 is what I'll submit. And then in the editing, for me, I know most writers tend to write really long, and then the editing is a question of condensing and consolidating characters and cutting.
You.
Not for me. My agent and editor were mostly like, could we sit in this scene for a little bit longer? Could we have another beat here? And they just kind of teased out more of the story, another probably 10 or 15,000 words that way.
How many words is the novel?
I don't remember exactly, but somewhere between 50 and 60,000.
Oh, wow.
I think. Yeah. Sparse.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. But great. And as I said, such a joy because you can really take it anywhere.
Thank you.
So advice for wannabe debut authors, what tips would you give?
Well, my path to publication was kind of funny. I worked in publishing for a while. I worked at the book media website Literary Hub for 5 years. And that really offered me a great bird's eye view of how the industry, was supposed to work. And I think that was really helpful for just seeing the way that other people kind of moved through the publishing world.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when it came time for me to take my own book more seriously, I wanted to step away from the industry just like a little bit because I was too close to how the sausage was made, So
is that why you left working for publishing?
I mean, I miss it. I do miss it. And I just, there's nothing like books and like book people. A dream job talking about books every single day. But that is why I stepped away, is I wanted to kind of spend some time working on my own voice and not think too much about what everyone else at work was thinking.
Right.
Advice for debut writers, though, I would say just cast a wide net. I got so much of my writing process, like before this too, was just submitting short stories to like literary journals, online magazines. And I had to get very comfortable and familiar with my old friend rejection. If we were to scroll through my submittable, you would just see like red boxes, rejected. But that's part of the process. And at some point, the letters get a little bit nicer and a little bit more personal and a little bit more encouraging, like this wasn't quite right, but maybe send something else, the next time you have it. And I think that is how you're getting on the right track.
So persistence. Maybe work for a publishing house for a few years.
Persistence, that is a much more concise way to say what I just said.
No, but I like the way you said it. Okay, I forgot to ask you what you hope readers take away from your book, from Maggie.
Can I say one more thing about the advice, though?
Yes.
I would say just know and stay true to the story you want to tell. Like, of course, you're going to get input from trusted first readers, friends, an agent, and an editor, hopefully. But, a lot of the early advice I got with Maggie, one in particular, like a note that I kept getting was that I should put chapters in, or I should make time and like place markers like a lot more clear. It's told in a very like fragmented style. Yeah. And some people didn't like that. And I thought, no, this is important to the way that I want the reader to feel when they're reading it. I wanted the lack of chapters to mean that the story kind of washed over you in the way that like grief honestly washes over you.
Oh, lovely.
There's no pause, right? A chapter is sort of like you could take a break. And it doesn't, I wanted it to mimic the feeling, the way that it feels when you're going through something like that. So I guess just the other advice I have for people is to think about your form and your structure and to kind of know yourself and to trust yourself in the story that you want to tell.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that because it is very, I guess, fragmented. So part of the reason it's so good to read anywhere is because you could just pick it up and there'll be like a fragment of thought. It's right. And then there'll be another fragment. So it's kind of like it's different and not having chapters. And it is sort of, it's all these thoughts that are coming to her and she makes these connections depending on what happens in her day that are not necessarily they're tied together in her grief, but they're not all tied together, the stories themselves.
Right. And they're not necessarily linear. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no.
Vignettes.
I forgot to mention that. Okay. So then what do you hope readers take away from this story?
I hope readers can feel like they can revisit and retell their own story at any time. I think, like you said, what she does is she kind of realizes that, there's been this myth that she's been telling herself about her marriage, their origin story. And I want people to feel like they can do that at any time. They don't have to hold on to stories that are not serving them. They can take the pen back,
That's what, Nora Ephron, I don't want to be the victim of my life. I want to be the hero, why she wrote.
Yes.
Okay. And then just last question, any books that you're reading now that you're loving?
Oh my gosh, that's such a fun question. Okay, wait, now of course you ask me that and I'm like, I've never read a book in my entire life. I actually can't read. Hang on.
I know.
I mean, so many books. Have you read Heart the Lover?
I haven't read it yet. How is it?
The new Lily King novel. I mean, best read with a box of tissues. I feel like you're going to weep. It's so good. Also a very slender novel, one that you can take anywhere. Kind of just this beautiful, like nostalgic farewell to youth in a way. It's heartbreaking and it's beautiful.
Okay. I mean, I loved her other books.
I think you're going to like this one.
Okay.
I don't know how she does it, So that was wonderful. I recently read Lonely Crowds by Stephanie Wambugu, also a debut that came out this year. Really phenomenal writing, really beautiful story about, I don't know, like who gets to be an artist and who gets to tell their story. Highly recommend.
Lonely Crowds?
Lonely Crowds.
Okay. Great. And that's it?
I mean, like, how long do you have? I could keep going.
Maybe one more.
One more. I would say What a Time to Be Alive by Jenny Mustard. I really, really loved. It's about this woman who she starts off at university and she's like, my life is going to be really different. I'm going to like reinvent myself. And it's just kind of about her first year there, the friends she falls in with. It deals with class in a really interesting way that I feel like I haven't seen enough of in literature. So this is really exciting to encounter. She falls in love for the first time. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I feel like actually all three of the books that I just recommended are fixated on like college and firsts and falling in love and nostalgia and youth. So I don't know what that says about where I am right now in my life, but
you're so old. Actually, I thought of another one. Are you working on something new now?
I am. I'm trying to. I feel like I've been so lucky because the book has brought me to so many places and introduced me to so many people that I would have never otherwise met. But it does mean that my dance card is a little full. So I haven't really had so much time to kind of sit with the new project. But I'm going to experiment with structure in this one again, I think. I'm trying to make it feel like play again. You know what I mean? Where I think you debut a book and all of a sudden, you get into like the business of writing. And I'm trying to come back to this place where it just feels like fun, like I'm in a playground, like I'm in a sandbox again. But because my day job is at the Brooklyn Museum, and museums are so cool. I've been coming to this museum since I was a teenager, and museums in general are so wonderful and interesting and weird. And there are all these kind of, secret behind the scenes things. So I think the next one is going to take place in a museum. It's also going to be kind of a love story. Great. Sort of. Normally, I tend to write kind of like magical realism. So like the humor and the comedy was very new to me. And I think that is kind of how I created a sense of play for myself in this novel. So we'll see what happens in the next one.
Interesting. Yeah, because Annie Hartnett has magical realism. I think she said she likes to do that. Mm-hmm. And I thought I didn't like magical realism, but then I liked her book. I'm like, oh, maybe I do like it.
Just depends on whose hands it's in.
Yeah, exactly. I remember a while back, I did interview Lily King about writers and lovers, and she said she always was a waitress, and she found being a waitress was a really good way when you're a writer because you see so much of life that you can draw on. I don't know if there's a waitress in this book, but there was in that one, in Writers and Lovers.
I'm not going to give anything away, but I will say that, Lily King, I used to be a hostess at a restaurant on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And I have never read anyone's description of just like the patter and the banter and the rhythm of a restaurant, the way that she gets it on the page.
Exactly. You can tell. And I guess she was just saying you need to have those kind of professions where you're out in the world. It really helps you see people. Yeah. And that was very good. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I can't wait to read your next book.
Thank you.
And everybody should go out and buy this book. It is great. And it really makes you think. And it is funny.
We promise.
We promise. We promise. Thank you for listening. As Katie said in another interview, this book is for anyone who has gone through a hard time, had a best friend to help them through it, or wants to laugh while they cry. Comedy is definitely an excellent way to deal with tragedy. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with an altogether different book. I like to mix things up. See you then.